On January 6th, rioters and domestic terrorists breached the fence, windows, and doors to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. This was an act that threatened one of the most important symbols of our democracy, but also threatened the lives of people conducting some of the most important work of our House and Senate, the certification of the national election. This was an act of violence by people who claimed fraud in our national election because they have been fed lies by many of their leaders. There is no evidence of voter fraud that has been presented in the courts. None. But if someone says it to you enough times, you start to believe it. What concerned me most about the protests and the domestic terrorists yesterday was their use of Christian nationalism, Christian symbols, and even the name of Jesus to support their efforts. An authority on Christian nationalism defines it in this way. Christian nationalism, at its core, is the desire to see Christianity be privileged in the public sphere. The Christianity of Christian nationalism is very narrow and specific. It is typically white supremacist, nativist, and authoritarian, writes Andrew Whitehead. Let me repeat those last three terms again. Christian nationalism is typically white supremacist, nativist, and authoritarian. As a nation created all people as equal, to even say that one religion is superior over others goes against our democracy. And as one of our staff members said in a meeting this week, what took place on January 6th was not Jesus. Jesus was the opposite of those three terms. He welcomed everyone, including when his family welcomed the wise men from a different country. Jesus preached against the absolute power of the government and the synagogue, and he most frequently talked about how we treat the poor, the outsider, and vulnerable children. Anyone who has been left out of the opportunity to community and the common good. The people of our congregation and faith community fall into at least three categories on the issue of Christian nationalism. First, there are those who believe when leaders say things like America first or America chosen by God ideology. And what I'm going to say is likely to anger you. These phrases are not consistent or supported by the Bible or Lutheran doctrine. It is false teaching. I know some of you may worry that our nation is less white and less Christian. But I challenge you and give you permission to change your mind about Christian nationalism. It won't be easy, and it may cost you relationships with those who share your views. This is a time to ask how far off the message of Jesus have we gone in listening to extremist Christian nationalism. What we saw at the Capitol on January 6th was not of Jesus. Secondly, there are those who want our church to speak out against Christian nationalism, against injustice, oppression, discrimination, sexism, and racism, and who want us to be bold as we do this work. First Lutheran will continue our response to the killing of George Floyd last summer, and we will continue to work to understand our own implicit racial bias. Jesus welcomed the Samaritan woman at the well. He preached mercy and inclusion. He fed huge crowds. One was of people who were considered insiders, and one that was of outsiders, or foreigners, you might call them. He performed miracles of loaves and fishes for both groups. Jesus stopped his dear friend Peter when he drew his sword to confront those who came to arrest Jesus. What we saw on January 6th was not of Jesus. Third, There are those who are generally not engaged in current affairs. And January 6th raised feelings of fear and confusion. How did this happen? Our national capital breached by Americans against Americans? Isn't this wrong? Some carried flags saying, Jesus saves, or Trump flags, or Jesus 2020 flags, or Confederate flags, and they used them to replace American flags. This is against American law and our sense of moral justice. To you who are fearful and anxious, I offer these words by Adam Russell Taylor. God is a bridge over troubled waters. God is a bridge over troubled waters. January 6th was a day of such pregnant hope and possibility because it was a day in which we learned that the state of Georgia elected its first African American senator. And his name was Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, and Jewish activist John Ossoff. The majority of voters in a deep southern state seemingly rejected nationalism and Trumpism. We can stand on the rock and work to insist that today is the last gasp of Trumpism. What we saw this week was not Jesus. During the Epiphany season here at First Lutheran, from now until Ash Wednesday in mid-February, we are going to continue to be centered in our worship in Jesus, what he said and what he did. We're calling this our Body and Soul series. As the pastors and program staff looked at the readings for this time, we recognized that in these readings, Jesus is seeking to help people be whole, to be healed, to get rid of things that prevent their well-being. Each week, we're going to look at one aspect of wholeness in Jesus Christ, be it our social well-being, our emotions, our bodies, how we use money, the wellness of our minds and spirits, and our curiosity and learning. Each week, you'll hear an interview with one of the healing people in our community, and we're going to share the story of an important mission partners who are working locally, nationally, and globally, because this is the work of Jesus. This is our work in the name of Jesus, not spewing hateful threats against others because of their race, religion, or gender, or destroying property, threatening the safety of our country's leaders, or disrupting the work of democracy. Thank you for listening today.